Jonathan Schell is here. He is the Harold Willens Peace Fellow at the Nation Institute here in New York. He's also a visiting lecturer at Yale Law School and a writer for The Nation and Harper's Magazine. His latest book is The Unconquerable World, Power, Nonviolence, and the Will of the People. I am pleased to have him back at this table. Welcome back.
Great to be back. You
and I were just saying that probably during the build-up to the war, you and Michael Ignatieff, a dialogue that went back and forth between you, I got such a huge feedback. I know you did, and Michael said recently that he got more feedback than he did almost anything he'd ever done. Yeah. And part of it was because it was two people who respected each other, having a civil dialogue about something that troubled them greatly.
Yes, yes. Well, he's the most civilized person. It's easy to have a civil dialogue with him.
So how do you feel now, thinking back about all those arguments you made that evening, and where we have come? Do you want to sit back and say, I told you so?
I want to say it, but I don't think I will. It'd be rather unbecoming. No. You know, honestly, for me, there have been some surprises, too. I'm honestly surprised to discover that there are no weapons of mass destruction. If you remember, part of the argument I made back at that time was that even if there were such weapons or programs or what have you, that this was the wrong way to deal with it, that you can't really deal with nuclear proliferation by military means. It's just an infeasible project. You have to deal with it in some other way. So I have to say that that part of it has been a surprise for me, but hardly a surprise that tends to make me support the war more than I did when I was against it before the war.
Right. So you don't take any great... The fact that it didn't discover them is not significant. It's significant as to whether America was misled or they knew better or evidence was hyped and all that. Yeah. Because that suggests a relationship between leadership and the people.
Very much so. It's very significant in those ways, clearly, yes. But it wasn't part of my argument before the war. So it's something that surprises me, I have to say. Yeah.
Tell me what your biggest argument was, because I'm interested in this now, because lots of people are having to reevaluate, because any war, as everybody knows, plans go awry once the action starts, and there is a law of unforeseen consequences.
Yeah, there is.
You know. Yeah. So tell me why you were opposed to the war. Remind me, and then why things are as they are. But as soon as I say that, I remind you, the president is saying, you know, we didn't make the mistake. There was not a mistake to go in there. A lot of people believe that, and that things are going better than they may be. You may assume.
Yeah, I was really amazed that the decision was made to go to war, that thing was thought up. It seemed to me like really they said a war of choice, but I felt that it was almost gratuitous, like, you know, driving the wrong way on the throughway or something like this. And I think there are a couple of basic reasons, but certainly one of them was that I just don't think that one country can take responsibility for the future of another country. That's an imperial project. And I think that the whole history of the 20th century shows that is not only wrong, but actually unworkable and infeasible. And all of the great empires of the 20th century went down like 10 pins, one after the other, including the Soviet Empire most recently. So to get into that business, get back into that business of going into a country, trying to write the Constitution for them, telling them what kind of economy that they're going to have, telling them what the role of religion is in their life. All of that seems to me, and still seems to me even more now to be completely infeasible.
But let's talk about that for a moment. Is that what they are doing? Are they saying, we're going to write the Constitution for you, we're going to decide all those questions? Or are they sort of begging the Iraqis to do it and do it as fast as they can because they realize that there is, you know, the possibility of this getting worse?
Well, they want them to do it, but they want them to do it in the way that we would like them to do it. And they wanted them to do it certainly in a way that's in concert with American interests. I mean, take the question of the weapons of mass destruction. Let's suppose they become a delightful democracy. I mean, I'm not holding my breath on that.
Sure.
Let's suppose it's Switzerland on the Tigris, okay?
Right.
Who's to say that in that neighborhood, with Iran next door trying to get nuclear weapons, Israel already having them, that they wouldn't do what many other... Pakistan, India, and let's not forget the United States.
Right.
Many democracies, in fact, most of the nuclear powers are democracies of one kind or another. So In other words, we have a list of requirements for them, and already we have dictated to them that they are going to have an open, so-called free economy with no controls on foreign investment and so on. That's been decided already by fiat. Now, presumably, they could kind of reverse it or something. Also, for instance, the other day, someone asked, you know, Rumsfeld, not the other day, actually a couple of months ago, what if it turned out to be a sort of fundamentalist Islamic regime? He said, that's not going to happen. So we're ready to let them decide, but it seems we want them to decide the things that we want them to have. And
we'll let them decide as long as it's option A or B, but not if it's option C. If it's option C, you can't decide.
It's off the table, and there are 140,000 troops over there to make sure that option C is not chosen. I honestly don't think that it is in our power to force them to decide. I think at the end of the day they will decide, as happened in Vietnam. I hope they make a wonderful decision. I hope they procure a delightful government for themselves. I'm not confident of that. But I don't think that it's our business, and I don't think it's within our power to do that. And that's pretty much what I thought.
So therefore, what should the United States do?
Well, I don't think there are good options, honestly. And so if I say what I think should be done, I'm not imagining that it leads to something wonderful. I think a dreadful mistake has been made. I think there's going to be a heavy price paid.
Well, stop. I mean, the dreadful mistake was launching this war in the first place. Without, are you saying launching the war, period, or launching the war without UN support and a sort of universal commitment among other
For me, launching the war, period, was the mistake.
So if France and Russia and Germany and Japan and China all said, we're with you 100%, it still would not have met your test for what the United States should do.
It would have been much better, but it wouldn't have met the test for me. No, because once again, even if, and now I'm about to say that we should turn it over to whoever in the UN is willing to step up to that responsibility, but I'm not about to say that that's going to lead to a wonderful outcome. I hope it can. I don't want to rule anything.
What's a wonderful outcome?
A wonderful outcome would be a parliamentary democracy in Iraq, and no more dictatorship, no ethnic war, no partition of the country into three parts. All of these
but do you
things.
think that is impossible to have?
No, I won't say it's impossible.
But do you think it's likely?
I don't think it's likely.
What do you think is likely then?
Well, what I fear is a deepening resistance to the United States and more bloodshed, and that one way or another we are going to have to extricate ourselves from that. And so in my opinion, the sooner that can be done in an orderly way, the smaller the cost is going to be. I recognize that there's an obligation that we have incurred there, and we can't just say, tomorrow we're out. But I think there has to be an orderly transition to some kind of international arrangement that will have greater legitimacy, but even that very transitional to whatever they are able to put together there in Iraq. I wish them well. Maybe they will be able to put together something that's much better than Saddam Hussein. I pray that they can, but quite honestly, it's hard to find the evidence for that right now. It's hard to... You know,
wait. It's hard to find the evidence that they can put something together over there that's better than Saddam Hussein.
Well, no, that's such his regime.
Well, didn't you just say that?
I take it back if I said it, because that regime was so dreadful that the bar is very high. But there are other results there that are short of a wonderful result or such. I mean, it's very easy.
Well, forgetting what it means for the United States, what's an awful result over there? I mean, an awful result is a country would split up, I assume. You know, the sort of balkanization of...
that would be
That would be a bad result.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, a bad result would be... I'm talking about for the people of Iraq.
Yes.
That's what I'm talking about.
Yes.
What would be a bad result for them?
Well, you just mentioned one, a breakup of the country. Another would be a dictatorship of some other stripe.
Would it be a bad result for the people of Iraq if they had a kind of the same kind of government that they have in Iran? That'd be a bad result for them?
Well, from my point of view, that would be a bad result.
But I'm not talking about from the point of view of an American. I'm talking about from the point of view of the Iraqis.
Well, you know, that gets to what the heart of the whole matter is for me. And I honestly can't give you, I don't think I can give you a confident answer, and I don't know that anybody can, and that is, what do they want for themselves over there? I think that's what's going to decide at the end of the day. Now, when you have a country that's under dictatorship for 30 years, You don't know. Maybe they don't know what their political wishes and preferences really are. That's something that has to show itself in action. I think it's pretty clear already that they did not want Saddam Hussein. They seem to be quite happy to see him gone, except some. They're a certain minority. But it seems also getting clearer day by day that they don't want to be occupied by the United States, and they want that to end rather quickly.
Now, do you think
what they do want, I honestly couldn't tell you with confidence.
I agree. I totally agree with that. I don't know that they know, and it's hard to see what the options are. And when you say glibly a government like Iran, what does that mean for them?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, if you're a Sunni, it may not be as much, but we don't know that. Yeah. The other thing that intrigues me now is that there are a lot of people, and I say Tom Friedman, who, as you know, I admire you and others, who believe that this is a significant test for America, and that we have got to make it. Have got to make it work, because pulling out of it, to leave it to them to have their own, is not an alternative. I also believe that there are many Iraqis, I don't know how many, and this is where I have more questions than I have answers, who believe it's not a good either. I saw on a very good piece by Scott Pelley on 60 Minutes too, in which he did a story basically interviewing a dentist who said, I'm so happy that Saddam is gone, but I'm so unhappy with the Americans occupying it. On the other hand, this dentist said, I don't want you to leave because it's like a surgeon opening up the patient and leaving before they sew them back up.
See,
do you see what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I do see, absolutely. The question, though, is, in my mind, and it's an open question, but I'm rather pessimistic about the answer, is does our continued presence improve the situation over there? Or, on the other hand, let's say as in Vietnam, where I was a reporter these many years ago, does our continued presence actually exacerbate and worsen the situation and increase the size of the disaster?
And
that's the problem. That's the question.
And does it leave in its wake a failed state? And a failed state which is, you know, a breeding ground for the kind of terrorism we're all opposed to. Right?
That's right. That's right. That's right.
And that's what's happening in part. You know, some will argue that that is what's happening.
Well, I fear that it. I fear that it could. I fear that it could. But I'm not sure that the continued occupation by the United States with no others in the picture and so on and so forth can avert that result, that they can only make it worse and larger. That's the way it looks right now, because it looks as if the resistance is stiffening. You know, when I look at the political situation there, and I'm not expert on Iraqi politics, but what I look at even more than the latest car bombings or shootings or killings and so forth, I try to look at what's happening there politically. So when I see that the brother of the assassinated Ayatollah Hakim, that his brother, who was on the governing council, blames that on the occupying authority and on the United States, what I conclude from that is that politically things are not going well for the United States, and in those circumstances we could write them 20 constitutions and none of them would be adopted or have anything to do with what happens on the ground. Now, maybe they would, but I don't see it yet. I don't see the evidence for that.
Even though Ayatollah Hakim was basically counseling his people to wait.
Sort of wait and see. A kind of, exactly, a kind of wait and see attitude. He was a moderate.
He was the leading Shiite cleric in the country.
He was, he was. Right.
Pulling out, using my surgeon's analogy, is not the appropriate thing, or do you believe it is such a quagmire that like Vietnam, or like the advice of Putin to George Bush, he said, watch out, because you may be having the same experience we ran up against in Afghanistan?
Well, I think that's a very real possibility. It seems to me that the best of bad alternatives is for the United States very quickly to turn over the political aspect of the occupation to an international body, to the United States, to a true coalition. At the same time, if in that context the United States has something to offer, it's hard to say what the timetables would be in terms of economic assistance, even in terms of troops, you know, how quickly a changeover could take place. Then, in that context, you know, it's not just running away, you know, pulling out in the next instant. then I think that the United States might have a contribution to make. But all of it will depend, excuse me, on how things, what the people there want and whether they resist it or accept it. And what we're hearing day in and day out from over there is that they don't want us to be there, and they certainly don't want us to be calling the shots as the single superpower and occupier along with Britain and Poland and one or two others.
We don't know, however, I think it's fair to say, no, I'm suggesting this, that they don't want an occupying power who's there for the distance, clearly. They do not want to be occupied. And no one, no country in the world wants to be occupied by someone who's not of their country.
Well, that's it exactly. Think about Vietnam, back in the 60s and 70s. The United States would have been absolutely delighted if the South Vietnamese government could have turned itself into a real democracy, won the support of its own people, and permitted the United States to leave. But they were unable to pull that off.
But in the end, what the North Koreans wanted was not to free South Korea. They wanted to rule South Korea. Am I right or wrong? Or not?
Vietnam, I think.
I'm sorry. I said Korea. Vietnam. Vietnam.
They did indeed.
I mean, they did indeed. They didn't stay. They did. In fact, I think Saigon became Ho Chi Minh City, not Viet Cong City.
No, absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And that's where that is where it's murky in Iraq, because it's hard to know, as we were saying before, what the authentic will of that people is. It's a little early to say, but right now it doesn't look as if our staying there and arranging their affairs for them is something that they are welcoming or accepting.
And it doesn't look like we're getting a whole lot of people stepping forward to say, we want to help you.
Well, once again, you see, the only ones who are stepping forward is now Turkey.
Right.
But our own governing authority says they don't want the Turks.
The governing authority in Iraq.
That's one. The one we have picked, the one we have chosen, the governing council over there says we don't want Iraq. So once again, you see this clash, as with perhaps with the economy and a whole list of other things, where what the United States wants that country to want may turn out to be different from what they do want.
In terms of all the arguments made against the war, I know, but I'm wondering if we would look back at all the people who opposed to going to war, that in fact what has gone wrong are the things that they predicted would go wrong, or is it something else that was not foreseen?
I think that most of what's gone wrong was foreseen. In other words, number one, that there would be terrific resistance, guerrilla resistance. Certainly this was predicted. This was foreseen. There were not so many, and I was not among those who said there are no weapons of mass destruction. There were some who did say that. Scott Ritter said that that's a distinct possibility. He didn't say there are none. He said it's a distinct. He was proven quite right. A very important one that we haven't mentioned so far is we have to remember that the whole point of this operation was to save the world from a threat of the spread of weapons of mass destruction.
Or falling into the hands of terrorists.
Of him having them or handing them over to terrorists. Now, what we've actually had in reality, and in part precisely because of this policy of regime change and preemption, is that at least two countries, North Korea and Iran, citing these policies of ours, have actually stepped up their programs for acquiring these weapons, and there seems precious little that the United States can do about it. So,
okay, well, to stop there, do you believe then, and just make sure I hear you clearly, you believe that the Iranians are lying when they say we don't want nuclear bombs?
I do. I think so. I mean, that's just a judgment. Okay. That's a speculation and a judgment, but that's the way it looks. Countries, they go as far down this path as they can without avowing an intention to actually have a nuclear weapon. Then, like India in 1974, they say, oh, we've just set off a peaceful explosion of a nuclear weapon. And then, 15 years later, they step forward and say, yes, we're a nuclear power.
Or what else they do is they say, look, of course we have no intention of building a nuclear weapon. However, and what they mean by that is that we want to have the possibility of doing it if we decide.
That's it exactly.
Because you can't make a decision overnight that you want to have them.
And they get up to the point where if they make that decision, then in 6 months they can have it, and in that point they pull out of the Non-Proliferation Treaty the way Korea already did, and they're in business.
The greatest irony of all this is that, and how much of the evidence was there or not there, and what the level was, when the argument was made between that Saddam Hussein was in bed with all kinds of terrorists, you know, and that Iraq was a state that was full of terrorists, how many they may have been there are probably a lot more now because of the way things have gone.
Well, you know, we've had no terror. No, that's absolutely right. We made things easy for them by shipping over a couple of 100,000 Americans. Much easier to get at us over there to attack us.
Because it's Now let me move to this whole area of questioning. Because tell me what this book is about.
Yes,
it's about the ideas we've been talking about in a specific way, writ larger.
Yes, it's really a kind of historical analysis. I mean, it sounds very, very grand, but of the roles of violence and nonviolent action in the 20th century, and really one of the themes, or maybe the one that's most pertinent to the Iraq story, is that it's turned out that empires with all the tremendous force at their disposal, and usually it's overwhelming force, have turned out historically, going back to the beginning of the century and continuing right through the century, have proved unable to impose their will even on small countries. So what that suggests to me is that there's some kind of power out there, some kind of political power that is not based ultimately on force and that can be highly successful. Just to give two quick examples very quickly, one was, of course, Gandhi's nonviolent movement against the British Empire, which was the greatest empire of its time, and was his resistance movement was highly successful, and it's gone. Another example would be the Soviet Empire, more recently, where once again, in a really a political process that I think we're far from understanding or sufficiently appreciating, the people in that empire managed to rid themselves of Soviet rule. As Lech Wałęsa, the leader of the Solidarity movement in Poland, put it before the joint session of Congress here in the United States, he said, "We did it without breaking a single pane of glass." Now that's a glorious and splendid history of world historic change occurring by some means other than war. And I think it's something that's full of promise, and it shows that there's something in our world that we can turn to and rely on other than violence, really to bring about major historical change.
How much, back to where we are as a nation, damage do you think has been done to America and its effort to exert positive influence around the world?
Yeah. You know, this is one of the...
Because we are now a suspect.
Yeah, this is one of the saddest things of all to me. You know, when the Cold War ended, and even before the Cold War ended, you had a couple of dozen countries that of their own free choice looked over at not just the American but other democratic systems, parliamentary, presidential, what have you, looked at those and said, look, we need to get a new government for ourselves. We've kicked out the dictator. What do we want? You know, do we want fascism? Do we want some kind of... No, we want to have this sort of parliamentary free system of government. It was a matter of the free choice of those countries in Poland, in Hungary, in the Philippines, in Spain, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So this was, I think, a credit to the system of government in the United States and in other countries where you had democracies. Now, the tragedy is, to me, that by seeking to impose by military force our way of life on another country, namely Iraq at this moment, I think we're actually discrediting democracy. So the really remarkable and hugely effective influence that the example had, I'm afraid is being spoiled right now. I mean, we actually have a world, you could actually say, I think, and prove this, that something like a majority of the human species opposes our policy in Iraq. It's not a good advertisement for our democracy, if that's what we're interested in.
Well, there is an anti-Americanism that exists, perhaps because of the doctrine of preemptive action, and for other reasons, perhaps having to do, you know, that inevitably, if you are as large as we are and as successful as we are culturally and economically and in other ways, you know, bigness itself breeds a certain kind of respect. And at the same time, it's often been offset by the sense of values and the sense of freedom and the sense of openness that this country had. That's the reason that we are, you know, a nation of immigrants, correct?
Yeah.
So far.
Yeah.
Here's what's interesting to me, and because I've asked a lot of people this on this program. including the foreign minister of Egypt. What if they could possibly find some way to bring Iraq to a place that you said, you know, where the Iraqis find a way to a solution that's good for them, you know, and all the worst possible scenarios don't work. And secondly, these are huge ifs, that the Israeli-Palestinian thing would find some way of coming to common ground. Would America be able to regain its place and what it stood for? Most of them say yes.
Yeah.
I hope that's true, and would like to believe it's true.
I think it would be true, and of course there's an undercurrent of anti-Americanism, and there are all kinds of reasons and things that we haven't, you know, discussed today for that. But you know, if you look back at the 1990s, you didn't have this powerful resentment and of this country. It was a sort of chronic thing, and it has been chronic throughout the, you know, post-World War period. But now it's really been exacerbated, I'd say, to the greatest extreme that I've seen. And I do think that increase in it is definitely traceable to the new policies.
The other thing that I don't know the answer to is whether the administration, and I would like to have them here, whether it's Rumsfeld or the president and the vice president, to talk about it, and so would a lot of other people, on their own respective forums and venues and papers, do they now say, we realize that what we hope for is not achievable, this sort of within the middle of that region, some kind of country that would have a positive influence on the region, because I'm willing to give them the benefit of good intentions, you know, gone wrong, and have they abandoned that idea and say, if we can just find a way to get out with our, you know, with a modicum of Iraqis in control of their own country, doing things that that are not inimical to the interests of the United States.
I think it's entirely possible, because you have to remember that really the idea of turning Iraq into a model of democracy for the whole Middle East, I mean, that's an idea that Thomas Friedman had consistently from the beginning throughout. But for the administration, it came rather late. It was really just a couple of weeks before in this American Enterprise Institute speech that the president gave that they embraced that. I honestly don't see them personally as being such great lovers of democracy that they would be unwilling to see, let's say, a sort of client dictatorship develop there. After all, during the Cold War, there was many a country throughout, well, the Middle East, just for a start, you know, allies or clients, or in Latin America or what have you. I can imagine that they would very easily settle for that. Nothing that would make anybody jump for joy or improve the reputation of the United States or be a model for anybody, but would just be a sort of modus operandi. But even that, I suspect, given the passions, the nationalistic passions that seem to be present in Iraq, just as they have been in just about every country in the world throughout the 20th century, given that, even this sort of milder sort of, but some kind of brutal dictatorship that's not quite as bad as Saddam Hussein or something, but that would do our will. You know, something along the lines of Saudi Arabia, let's say, you know. I'm not even sure that option is there. It's nothing I want to see.
But you're saying you think they would be happy with that, you think?
I think it would be, I think that they
It'd
probably
be a face-saving measure for them?
I think they very likely would content themselves with that. They do in many other parts of the world, you know. Throughout Central Asia, for instance. We're very happy in Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan to have terrible dictators, not as bad as Saddam Hussein, but really full-scale dictators, and we're very happy to support those governments and put bases there and so forth. And I think that they might well be content to have such a thing in Iraq. But I don't know. You have to ask them about that. Yeah.
Let me just make this one last point as we leave with Jonathan Schell. The Unconquerable World, Power, Nonviolence, and the Will of the People, you know, is an argument in a sense that there are restraints.
Yes,
to
exactly.
Power.
Exactly.
And dictating things as you would have them be.
Exactly. There's something in this world that does not love an empire. And if you overreach, you pay a price. I think we have overreached, and I think we are paying the price, and I think we should back off in order to minimize the cost of these profoundly mistaken policies that we've adopted.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you.